Well, good morning. Today we're going to show my favorite way to build a fire. I've heard it mostly referred to as the upside down fire. There are some benefits to it where it burns extremely cleanly and it burns in a very measured way, and it makes the most of your available fuel, in my opinion. So I'll show you how to build one. First, we're going to need our fuel, which is our main firewood, and that is going to go on the bottom layer. Now, if you can, might not always be possible, I like to lay it point up, and that gives it a better place for the initial flame to catch. So there's our three largest pieces, and they're going on the bottom. Is that a little counterintuitive? Yes, but you will see. Next, we take our medium-sized pieces. I tend to aim for about half the size of the bottom layer. A little smaller is fine, a little bigger is fine, but you want to essentially go large, medium, medium again if you need to, small, smallest, tinder kindling. So here is the medium layer. I like to lay these at a diagonal. If you lay them straight across, what's going to happen is it's going to burn through the center there and collapse, and all this good fuel on the ends will tend to be wasted. So you can prevent that by laying your medium pieces and small pieces at a diagonal to each other so that they're more captured as they fall. So we'll do another little medium layer here. You just want to make them fit as best you can. And then we're not going full bushcrafty this episode. These are pieces of bur oak firewood from my wood pile. They've been under a tarp for about 8 months now, so they're at about a medium dryness. They're certainly not wet. You may get some interference here from my son's cat, Wraith. She loves being out in the woods with people. So now we're going to go to our small layer. And this is small enough to fit directly across, so we can just lay it like that. Oh, here's a nice piece that can fill in that gap. And this is the last of the orderly stuff. Now, to get this going, what you need is a flame and coal set that will last about 5 to 10 minutes. So what I've done is I've broken up a relatively dry stick from the woods. That's birch bark there. One of the most fantastic tinder sources if you have it available to you. And we're going to make a mess here on top. That's one of the wax and torch fuel cedar wood fire starters that we made in the last video. We're just going to pile this final kindling layer all around. It does not have to be neat. It does not have to be tidy. It just needs to burn and generate some coals. Now, the theory behind this, what's going to happen is this is going to light, and we'll go ahead and do that now. And as the heat reaches this kindling layer, it's going to light on fire, and the fire will burn it will tend to burn more straight down than off to the sides. The central coal pile will stay roughly in the center. And as it burns, the smoke will be drawn upwards back through the flame, almost like a reburn effect. Once this really gets going, you can have very close to a smokeless fire, and it burns one layer at a time. So it's going to burn this kindling layer and then down to our small layer, and by the time it gets through the small layer and has generated coals, those coals are mostly going to fall in these gaps here, and that's going to ignite these guys, which are also drying out and heating up from the layer burning above them and starting to generate their own smoke, which again feeds that central flame and makes it burn hotter and longer. By the time we get down to the bottom layer, these will have been drying and heating for quite some time, which makes it really, really helpful if your larger pieces are a little damp, a little wet. One way to do these fires, if you don't have good firewood on hand, is simply to get a large dead branch, saw it into equal-sized chunks with a little pocket saw, or break it, split each of those chunks in half, and use the largest parts of the branch as your bottom layer, the medium parts of the branch as your mid layers, and then the twigs as your kindling and small layer. And then some birch bark with a lighter will get you going. I've done that before. This is also a really handy technique for campfire wood that you're forced to buy when you go car camping or to a state park or whatnot, and you're not allowed to bring your own firewood. When they deliver those bundles, you can open up the bundle, take 2 or 3 of the large pieces and make those your bottom layer. Use an axe or a hatchet to break up a couple of other pieces for your mid and small layer, and then gather some brush and twigs for your kindle and tinder layer. And that works really well. I've found, even though that stuff is usually marked as kiln dried, it's not as dry as I would like, but this will work really, really well for a situation like that. Now, I'm going to stop talking for a little bit, and we'll leave the video running. I'll speed it up so that you can see the progression of this. Actually, before I speed up the footage, we should talk about the negatives of this method. As you can see, it is a slower starting fire. Now, you can increase the speed by adding a lot more tinder on top, a much bigger nest than I did. I didn't do that this time. This time is not a factor for me, but if you need heat now, you would want to use 3-4 times as many small branches as I did here. Just a big rat's nest on top. The top layer should be an absolutely chaotic mess to expose as much surface area and give the flame as many paths to take as possible. After that, it will become orderly. So one good reason not to use this build is if you need heat right now. Now, one good reason to use this build is if you have some time and would like your firewood to last a long time, and also it generates a huge amount of very hot coals at the end, which are great for cooking and last a lot longer than the coals from other types of builds that I've tried. Okay, it's been a couple of minutes now, and as you can see, the kindling layer has taken off, and we've already got a relatively clean flame going on, not too much smoke happening. The central core is heating up, and I can see that the small layer, see if I can zoom in here for you, has already begun to catch. And you can see that red hot glow at the center core there. That's essentially going to keep drilling down through the layers. One thing I do really enjoy about this build is that the larger layers have enough time to heat and dry before they begin to combust, that the large pockets of moisture don't tend to throw large burning embers or chunks or pop very often. Of course, that's going to depend on your wood, but that's been my experience, is this makes for, in my opinion, a safer campfire, as it's not throwing burning embers outside of the ring. This is a pilot rock ring that I bought years ago after I was curious as to what the National Park Service used, because they were out there for years and years and years and seemed to remain in pretty good condition for a very, very long time. And Pilot Rock makes these. I bought mine through Northern Tool, a tool distributor up here in the northern Midwest. It was a fairly reasonable price. I believe it was maybe $200 with the grade assembly. I'll pause this now for a few moments, and we'll come back when it's a little more exciting. Okay, it's been a further 4 minutes or so, and as you can see, now one of the medium layers has begun to catch. As such, we're still not generating very much smoke at all. That's a very nice thing if you have someone that you like to go into the outdoors with that is a little extra sensitive with allergies or to smoke. I certainly don't enjoy big clouds and plumes of smoke drifting in my face. This one does tend to burn a lot more cleanly than most builds, in my experience. And it uses up almost all of your wood, and you get a long burn time out of it. I would consider this to be about an hour's worth of firewood generating real heat. I absolutely love watching those clear waves of heat coming off of the top. with so little smoke being generated. As you can see, the middle layer has some moisture in it that you can see starting to bubble and boil out of the ends. Another quick tip that I can give you is if you need to get a fire going rapidly and not end up with unburned pieces. The pieces you see in my fire pit are from last season when I put it out with a bucket of water towards the end. In the fall it gets quite dry up here, and you never want to leave unattended coals and embers. But if you want to ensure a very clean, easy fire that you don't have to tend at all, split your pieces shorter, or saw them shorter rather. Pieces no longer than your forearm tend to be the best, in my opinion. I have a theory. I don't know if it's correct or not, but my theory is that the water trapped inside the wood acts as a coolant, and the structures of the wood that naturally exist to draw water up through the tree begin to cauterize as you burn the center, and more moisture gets pushed to the ends through those natural structures and then trapped. So my theory is, if your pieces are long, you'll be pushing moisture to the very ends of the piece, but it won't have any way to balance itself until heated in the most inefficient way possible. So that's my personal thoughts on why the ends take so very long to burn, and even when you shove them into the center towards the end of a fire, that you have a hard time with them. So if you really want to make life easier on yourself, for example, a campfire wood situation where you had to buy it, saw the pieces in half first and then split them down, and you will get a rocket ship of a fire. Okay, I'll pause this for a bit until we get to the second mid layer. So something else I thought I'd mention, and by the way, I hope the audio is better than last time. I picked up a Rode wired lavalier mic, one of the more inexpensive options, and a portable DAC to be able to feed it directly into my S24, which is what I'm recording these on. So let me know how you feel about the audio, or if I should go back to the original way. But something I thought I'd mention about these is this is not just my favorite fire for building as a campfire, but also in our indoor wood stove. We use firewood throughout the winter as supplementary heat. We have a heat pump arrangement and a propane furnace. When your temperatures can dip below -40 for a week or two each year, it's best to have backup heat sources. Our wood stove is tended to take the edge off of our propane usage and electric heat consumption. But this is exactly how I build fires in our fireplace, using those exact same fire starters. And I think I probably went from the way I used to build a fire in the stove to having a smoky mess in the house as I had to open it up to breathe, maybe 3 or 4 times a season, to never. I never have a failed fire in the stove with this method. And it burns very cleanly and very hot for longer than the other types that I've tried, and I've experimented with all of them over the years. You can see that nice coal generation that we have going on in the center. And our 4th layer down is about to hit. And you can see that the smoke generation is pretty minimal. As it continues to get hotter, that will go down yet further, which is another odd thing about this style. As you get to the larger pieces, they'll be further dried out and pre-warmed, and they will generate less smoke naturally, and some of the smoke will get drawn into that hot core through convection and be reburned as flammable gases. If I'd made this with shorter pieces, almost all of that smoke would be being drawn into the center because the entire pile would be a hot set of coals. As it stands, it's a little on the long side, and you can see any smoke being generated is being generated from the cool ends. Okay, as you can see here, we've kind of hit a critical mass point, which I'm quite happy about because we are in a quote-unquote spring of northwest Wisconsin, and this is a type of weather that I like to refer to as grim and dismal, which I'm going to coin the phrase grimsmal. It is quite chilly out here. It's about 34, 35, and a little bit of a breeze, but this fire is throwing off quite a bit of heat now. And further to my point about the lower levels drying off as you go, you can see that the second to lowest layer is already starting to dry out. And as I mentioned about those, I forget the structure in a tree that draws up the moisture, but right now that second to lowest layer is not actively on fire. It's not creating embers and coals in the center, but it is being dried out. And the further it can dry out from the heat above before it actively catches fire, the drier it will be overall by the time it does catch fire, and you won't have those unburned ends as a problem. Let me take this off of zoom. As you can see, we don't have much smoke at all. In an enclosed space like a wood stove or a fireplace, where you get radiant heat reflecting all around, this is even more efficient, and it's very, very satisfying to go outside when you have a very full fireplace with suboptimal wood and to look up at your chimney and see nothing but heat waves. The recirculating patterns inside of a stove in particular will reburn almost all of that smoke, and it has that central support structure to do that. But as it stands, I'm not getting huge clouds of smoke in my face like you would with a teepee fire or a log cabin style, especially with, as it's turned out to be, not optimal firewood. And this is a rather large campfire, which I did for demonstration purposes. You can certainly scale this up or down as you like. And you may ask yourself, what do I do when it burns down and I want to keep it going for longer? Well, you can't rebuild it very easily as it stands, and I don't bother. So if I want to keep it going, I rely on the very hot coals that I've generated and just tend to lay pieces at a diagonal before it gets down to the 20 or 30% mark, and just lay it as more of a teepee. And that works just fine. But this fire is throwing off quite a bit of heat. At this point, I'm very comfortable sitting about 3-4 feet away. At some points, you'll see that smoke being drawn more towards the center. And keep in mind, it's rather breezy, so it's got some wind to overcome. But that very hot central core tends to draw the cooler air up towards it, towards the center, rather than blowing back in your face. As you notice, that second to last layer and the bottom layer caught nearly simultaneously. They've been drying out for quite a while now. We're at 25 minutes on the video, and with pauses, I believe we're at close to 45 minutes on the total burn time. So the bottom two layers have had quite a long time to dry out, and you can see how much faster they're catching than the top layers. Those were all from the same 2 chunks of firewood. So the difference is very, very noticeable. That's one of the best parts about this, is as long as you have your top 2 or 3 layers as drier stuff, which you can easily source from dry sticks in the woods, dry, twigs and branches, and even larger sticks that you find from wind blowdowns and such, dead trees. As long as those top 2 or 3 layers, as long as you can get a good 15 to 20 minutes of dry material to burn, you can work your way down through wetter and wetter material. Those bottom pieces were the same as the ones that were spitting and sapping at the ends for minutes and minutes, and they are burning quite brightly and very hot. Now that everything's burning fairly evenly all the way to the ends, you can see that our smoke continues to go down. It's the opposite of how I found most fire lays to go. Actually checking the temperature of the phone to make sure it's not getting overheated. It's about 2.5 feet away from the fire at the moment, and it's quite warm where I'm sitting, and I'm a little further away. I'd mentioned the longer lasting and hotter, larger coals earlier on. And by the time this burns down, as you can see, it's burning very, very, very evenly. We're going to get that layer of coals simultaneously. We're not going to have a small bed of coals that slowly, smokily expands. We're going to have one large batch of coals that, as I said, will be great for starting any further fire that you like, or cooking on for a long time. With this style of fire, I tend to get 45 minutes to an hour of cooking with no further fuel added, and getting a further fire started from that is extremely easy, and you can do whatever style you like. It'll have enough radiant heat to catch most material. We'll zoom in there, show you that red hot central core. We did get a little collapse there, but at this point, it doesn't matter. There's enough coals headed down from the center that it will all burn in the end. So I'll pause this and we'll come back for some coals before I douse it with water and call it a day. Well, this video should have been a little better prepared for, because we're getting some extra smoke from the wood around the periphery that's been soaked in snow and rain all season long, and the dry leaves that have fallen in the pit. But as you can see, we're getting down towards the coal phase, and if it weren't for those side pieces smoking, we'd be having a very clean coal bed right about now. As you can see, it's mostly burned straight through the center in a very controlled and regulated way. We've gotten more than an hour at this point out of our fire with two chunks of firewood and a small stick. Now, thought we'd wrap this up by showing how hot those coals were. I took some random pieces that were laying around the campsite and threw them on top. They are not dry at all. And you can see how much more smoke we're generating now. But they did catch nearly immediately without any drama of any kind. So, final thoughts. When to use the upside down fire. When you don't need direct body warming heat immediately. If you have 10 or 15 minutes to spare. If you want to get the most longevity out of the firewood you have available, it's a great choice. If you would prefer a far less smoky fire, especially if you have short pieces, as you can see with adding pieces at random log cabin style, now we're generating large volumes of smoke. If you need a lot of coals to cook on, especially long-lasting coals that will generate heat for a long, long time. If you want an easy and reliable way to start an indoor wood stove fire, it's a great choice. And when might you not want to use it? If you do need body warming heat immediately, that would be the only scenario that I see. But I'm going to call it a day for now, because this smoke is actually driving me out from the stuff I added on top of the embers. And thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, learned anything, and let me know how the audio was if you like. Thank you. Have a great week.